Good morning, everyone. It's kind of a foggy morning out there. It's like nice to see you. I was thinking about, actually, when I stepped out into the fog, I was thinking about Vrindavan. Sometimes it gets like that in the winter, like kind of foggy. We're going to be reading today. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So who remembers what you read about yesterday? Passing away.
We're reading about Bhishmadev and his boon and how he was shot with arrows but was waiting for I forget how many days, a lot of days, and how the Lord was fulfilling everyone's desires that day in so many ways in those days.
Yeah, sweet, right? It was a very sweet section of Bhagavatam. And now we're hearing about, so we've kind of been leading up to Krishna's leaving of Vrindavan, or not Vrindavan, of Dwaraka. He's been visiting, right, with his cousins and his family, relatives. Remember we heard about Kunti Devi and how she was praying to Krishna before he left. And now we're going to, this chapter is actually called The Departure of Lord Krishna for Dwaraka. So he's leaving Hastinapura, sorry, confusing everybody. So he's going back to his place of Dwaraka. So he was visiting over in Hastinapura, which is where his cousins and everyone lives. And it's interesting that he accomplished so much in the last little bit of his trip. He went to see Bhishmadev. He had these really sweet exchange with Queen Kunti. These amazing prayers that we can have for the rest of our existence that we can refer to, these wonderful prayers of Queen Kunti. And all of this happened just, near the end when he's about to leave. So it makes me think that so much can be accomplished even just with 1 minute with Krishna. Right? It's like for him, it's different. Like it's time is not an obstacle to Krishna because he's the master of time. He's the one who creates time. So for him, even if he's about to leave, and even as he's leaving, if he glances at some devotees on the way, while he's in the chariot, or he's looking up, you'll hear the description, I think next, maybe tomorrow, a little bit more about all the residents that are saying goodbye to him, right? The ladies up on the top of their palaces, and different devotees who are reciprocating with appreciating him as he leaves. And so each one of those devotees feels like they become completely immersed in Krishna, so much so that time kind of becomes irrelevant. It's just like Krishna's here, and then we hear about the after effects when Krishna's not here and how devastated they can feel. So we'll do some verses, and I'd like to, we're doing 14 verses, so let's split the reading. We'll go back and forth, okay? So we'll start, maybe you can start, and we'll do text 1.
Shanaka Muni said, after killing his enemies who desired to usurp his rightful inheritance, how did the greatest of all religious men, Maharaj Yudhishthira, assisted by his brothers, rule his subjects? Surely he could not freely enjoy his kingdom with unrestricted consciousness.
So pause for a moment. What does this verse kind of remind you of? The style of this inquiry. Does it remind you of another famous verse? Yeah, right? So do you know the English of that one? Or just roughly, what is it?
Dhirastu Vajra, Dhirastu Raja, Dharmasetra, Kurukshetra, Samaveda, Isva, Namaka, Bandhavashava, Kimakurata, Sanjaya. Sanjaya said, Dhirastu said, O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled at the place of pilgrimage, the Kurukshetra designed to fight. What did they do?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like after this, what happened next, right? So it's a similar type of question. Okay, so would you like to read the next one, Gopal?
Sutta Goswami said, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the maintainer of the world, became pleased after reestablishing Maharaj Yudhishthira in his own kingdom and after restoring the Kuru dynasty, which had been exhausted by the bamboo fire of anger.
Yeah, we can pause here for a moment. Let me see. So the bamboo fire of anger, in the purport, Prabhupada mentions that the world is like forest fire. We sing that every morning too, right? Like that. The world is compared to a forest fire caused by the cohesion of bamboo bushes. So you know how bamboo is extremely flammable? So if it's like rubs against each other, it goes up in flames and it really burns because it's quite dry, right? So such a forest fire takes place automatically, for bamboo cohesion occurs without external cause. It happens just organically within the bamboo forest, just by the rubbing of the bamboo. Similarly, in the material world, the wrath of those who want to lord it over material nature interacts, and the fire of war takes place, exhausting the unwanted population. So quite relevant for the world today, right? So it happens organically. It's like nothing external happens, just like within whatever's currently, the people who are currently living somewhere, the friction starts to build, and then all of a sudden we hear in the news, the headlines, right? Or it's happening in our own area, like, you know, that could also happen. So that's what that means. So in this case, they're talking about, this verse is referring to what had just happened with the exhausted by the bamboo. What, I'm going to ask you, what do you think it refers to? What just happened? What major thing just happened? That yeah, what major event is that referring to within the Battle of Kurukshetra? Yeah, Battle of Kurukshetra. So yeah, that's what they're referring to, right? It happened just within the family, just like there was no external person or force that came. It happened with the bamboos rubbing within their own forest. So the cousins just like friction, and then it just exploded into a war. Okay, so it's quite poetic. So any of you who are like poets, you could do some visuals or write something on that, you know? Okay, so next verse.
Maharaj Yudhisthira, after being enlightened by what was spoken by Bhishma Dev and Lord Sri Krishna, the infallible, engaged himself in matters of perfect knowledge because all his misgivings were eradicated. Thus he ruled over the earth and seas and was followed by his younger brothers.
During the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira, the clouds showered all the waters that people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of man in profusion. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cows used to moisten the grazing grounds with milk.
So we're hearing a description now of how everything can be auspicious. So it's a nice description. Happy, cheerful cows. Okay, next verse.
Rivers, oceans, hills, mountains, forests, creepers, and active drugs in every season paid the tax quota to the king in profusion. The rivers paid the tax?
So they all, what this is referring to is that all of the natural aspects of the world also were giving, right? The river will flow profusely to fertilize the land. The oceans will supply sufficient quantities of minerals, pearls, and jewels. The forest will supply sufficient wood, drugs and vegetables, like the herbs, right? The things that people use to heal. And the seasonal changes will effectively help produce fruits and flowers. So those are, it's a poetic, again, a poetic way of saying they're paying their taxes, but everyone is just so happy, including the inanimate things, sort of the rocks and the minerals and so on, that the earth is happy. Mother Earth is not, she's actually not, she's a person too. So she's manifesting her also pleasure, auspiciousness through these different wonderful outpourings from the earth, from nature.
So this description is a standard description of when there's proper arrangement and the connection. I was thinking about this just this morning, that with the proper social arrangement, there's human resources, superhuman resources, which they're talking about there, and then also divine resources that all become aligned. When human activities particularly centered around the Kshatriya king, when they are all in alignment, these things happen. And in the beginning of one narration about in the Mahabharata, it describes their anxiety. They said because without a proper ruler, someone occupying that position of Kshatriya king, even the rains won't fall regularly, or they won't have the effect that we're reading about there. Prabhupada talks about also, just to illustrate how the arrangement is, that even with certain astrological situations and that arrangement socially, that when the rains fall on the sea, jewels are produced. Yeah, it's just like things that are just beyond our comprehension, but that's the arrangement.
Yeah, it's like a barometer, like a a barometer of something, of progress. So one barometer for the social situation is what's happening on the Earth planet, like how things are running. And even if you think about the weather nowadays, it's like so erratic, right? It's like you can't really predict it. Cold, hot, rainy, dry. It's like sort of fluctuates a lot. And that is an example of something, the opposite of this, where it was very dependable. Like you're going to go out, the river's going to be doing this, that. Everything was, you could depend on everything functioning at a regular seasons. Like you had the rainy season, and that's it. Like the different types of things, but you didn't have the Florida weather, Florida experience, or other parts of the world too. Okay, text number 6. Can't remember who's next. Are you next? Kara?
Because of the kings having no enemy, the living beings were not at any time disturbed by mental agonies, diseases, or excessive heat or cold.
So what do you think about that? Quite amazing, huh? So imagine life without mental agonies, diseases, or excessive heat or cold. Wow. Such was the power of these great righteous leaders. Can you imagine? Because they're connected to Krishna too. So Krishna is the one who's actually giving the power and making all this peace of mind, ultimately. Yeah.
So these things come about when the one in charge has an enemy?
Has an enemy?
Yeah, so like these things, they come from like the leader's enemies.
Having no enemy. So when the king has no enemy.
So when there's no enemy, these things are absent. But when there are enemies, these things are there. So these things come from
No, it's the opposite. So because the king had no enemies, these things existed. So then,
No.
meaning like the peace, the no, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I understand.
Okay. So
Yeah. The
So how
freedom from mental agonies existed because there were no enemies.
okay.
So,
Okay.
yes, Prabhu.
It seems to me like the idea is that the righteous king was able to rule in such a way that he was able to keep everyone safe and happy, prosperous, and peaceful, so that they didn't have the kinds of miseries that would come from having lots of rogues and thieves and, natural disasters and so forth. He was able to mitigate the 3 miseries of material life.
Yeah, or even poverty, for example. Yeah. Also, keep in mind, this is right before Kali Yuga begins. So this is actually a bit more of an auspicious time than we're living in now in this age, right? So it's still, Kali Yuga has a whole other, much more difficulty in achieving this kind of situation. But yeah.
Because you look at now, our rulers are actually themselves the rogues and thieves.
Yeah.
So it makes for, not such a happy situation.
Yeah, and then can you imagine, like, if you don't trust the people who are at the top, it's like, oh, then who do you trust, right? So if it's not starting, if we're not seeing, all these residents of Hastinapura they had at the very top of their leadership someone they trusted completely. They would have trusted with their life, like they had that kind of loyalty and that respect and that trust based on experience, like this person is a trustworthy person. And then from that, it trickles down into our interactions with other people. Oh, okay, we're solid here, so let's, and then it creates a trustworthy society where everyone feels at peace and relaxed. You don't have to be anxious that people are out to get you and so on. And that's what helps with the lack of mental agony, right? Peace, the peace of mind. Okay, text number 7.
Sri Hari, Lord Sri Krishna, resided at Hastinapura for a few months to pacify his relatives and please his own sister, Subhadra.
So actually here, he extended his stay. Prabhupada says in this purport that he was about to leave. Remember we had heard he was about to leave? He was on I think in the painting at least, he was on the chariot and Kunti is speaking to him, Queen Kunti. Prabhupada says Krishna was to start for Dwaraka after the Battle of Kurukshetra and Yudhishthira's being enthroned, but to oblige the request of Maharaja Yudhishthira and to show special mercy to Bhishma Deva, Lord Krishna stopped at Hastinapur, the capital of the Pandavas. So he stayed longer for a few months and to please his own sister, Subhadra. So she's also there. She's married to Arjuna. So actually, when I was in Bangladesh in Belgium, I was giving a lecture in the morning, one of the mornings, and they have deities of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. They also have Radha Gopinath and Bornitai. But I had this, so I was doing, the class was on Rukmini and the letter she wrote to Krishna. So I was thinking, okay, I just asked like a question to the audience, like, on the altar, where do you see the connection with Dwaraka, like Krishna and Dwaraka? It's kind of just a trick question, but Jagannath is really Krishna and Dwaraka, and he's there with his sister Subhadra and his brother Balaram, but it's actually they're actually in the mood of Dwaraka, remembering Vrindavan, right? So, but they're residing in Dwaraka, so after Krishna got married. And Subhadra, at some point, she got married to Arjuna and then moved to Hastinapur, so he would go visit her. They had that close connection. And he also Krishna was very attached to his cousins as well, like Arjuna, because of their devotion. So let's do text 9, or we did 8. Did we do 8? No, 8. Let's do 8.
Afterwards, when the Lord asked permission to depart and the king gave it, the Lord offered his respects to Maharaja Yudhishthira by bowing down at his feet, and the king embraced him. After this, the Lord, being embraced by others and receiving their obeisances, got into his chariot.
Okay, and then text 9 through 10 is one verse.
At that time, Subhadra, Draupadi, Kunti, Uttara, Gandhari, Dhritarashtra, Yuyutsu, Kripacharya, Nakula, Sahadev, Bhimasen, Dhaumya, and Satyavati all nearly fainted because it was impossible for them to bear separation from Lord Krishna.
Yeah. So in that purport, Prabhupada says Krishna is so attractive to every living entity, especially for the devotees, that it's impossible for them to tolerate separation. Can you imagine? And they've been with Krishna for months. He's just been in their palace, having meals with them, talking to them. It mentions, in the next verse. Okay, let's do the next one, 11 through 12.
The intelligent who have understood the Supreme Lord in association with pure devotees and have become freed from bad materialistic association can never avoid hearing the glories of the Lord, even though they have heard them only once. How then could the Pandavas tolerate his separation, for they had been intimately associated with his person. Seeing him face to face, touching him, conversing with him, and sleeping, sitting, and dining with him.
Yeah, so those are the descriptions of what they did with Krishna. So they got to hug him, they got to converse with him, sleep, sit, and dine. Just what a level of intimacy. Imagine Krishna came here for a few months. Of course, Krishna is here, but his physical, like he comes in a physical form here, and you see him, right? Imagine we hold that spiritual vision. Krishna's among us, eating Krishna lunch with us. I mean, just imagine how attached you become to even a devotee, like friends, right? Like devotee friends or spiritual masters, mentors. Like we become so attached to those who remind us of Krishna. So imagine these devotees became so attached to Krishna, being with them. All right, 2 more verses, 13 and 14.
All their hearts were melting for him on the pot of attraction. They looked at him without blinking their eyes, and they moved hither and thither in perplexity.
That reminds me of the animals in Vrindavan, right? When Krishna plays his flute, it's described they don't blink their eyes. They just look, they stand there, their eyes. And this really, another really poetic description here. All their hearts were melting for him on the pot of attraction. What an amazing expression, right? So if you think about a stove, right? What's cooking in that pot? What's melting in that pot? Like we have butter or something, we're going to make something. So in this analogy, their hearts are the ones that are melting, and the pot is their attraction to Krishna. So when we become attracted to Krishna, our hearts melt, and really what happens is that all the stuff that makes our hearts hard also melts away. The things that block us, like envy, greed, jealousy, lust, all those things that are covering the actual soul, the heart, the real person, those things also melt away when we're connected to Krishna. So we have text 14, one more.
The female relatives, whose eyes were flooded with tears out of anxiety for Krishna, came out of the palace. They could stop their tears only with great difficulty. They feared that tears would cause misfortune at the time of departure.
Sweet, right? So they're crying out of separation, but they're kind of checking their tears because they don't want to disturb Krishna's journey, just in case it creates inauspiciousness. So I think we've all experienced that in our own small ways, where we might be really sad that someone's leaving, but we also want to let them go, right? Like they're about to go on a journey, and we don't want to just be standing there sobbing. We want to send them with some good words, or like make sure they have prasadam with them. So you kind of hold back your own feelings of separation temporarily until that person's gone. And then after that, then you can really feel it. So that's kind of what's happening here. These residents of Vrindavan are, I keep saying Vrindavan, these residents of Hastinapur are holding back their tears. It's very similar, right? We hear these descriptions of the devotees of Vrindavan. So anywhere that there's Krishna and his devotees, there's always this similar mood of like, no, please don't leave, Krishna, we want you forever, right? That's love and separation. Okay, so we're doing texts 11 and 12. Any questions or anything from that, what we read, or any comments? Okay, so we'll do 11 and 12, and we'll read these verses together because there's 2 of them. We'll just read the Sanskrit together just to save some time. Okay, ready? Satsangan mukta dushango hatum notsahate buddha kirtyamanam yasho yasya sakrit akarnya rochanam Tasmin yastadiya partha saheran viraham katam darshana sparsha samlapa shayanasana bhojanai. So the first Sanskrit word is something that I want to talk about, so just notice it here. Actually, the first line, Sat Sangat. What is that? What does that mean? Okay, yeah, there's different ways of, what are some other ways of describing it or defining it? Good association, okay. Eternal. What is Sat? What does Sat mean? There's quite a few synonyms that you can use, but Sat is a base word that's often connected with other words. It's added to other words. So yeah, so eternal. True. Did someone say truth? Truth, okay. Properly associated with someone, okay. Yes, and one word that's often given is pure. So Sat, pure, truth, real, eternal, right? And so we're going to talk about that. And then the second phrase after that is Mukta Dusango. Mukta Dusanga. So what do you think that means? Yeah, so Mukta is liberation, freed from, right? That's the way of saying it, freed from. So liberated from Dusanga. It sounds right? It sounds kind of not good. Dusanga. Bad, right? So the Prabhupada translates it as freed from bad materialistic association. So we have satsanga, pure sangha, dusanga, sango, or sangha, depending on how the verses. So that's, we want to be freed from that, and we want the other one, right? So by being in the translation, let's do the translation together. The intelligent who have understood the Supreme Lord in association with pure devotees and have become freed from bad materialistic association can never avoid hearing the glories of the Lord, even though they have heard them only once. How then could the Pandavas tolerate his separation? For they had been intimately associated with his person, seeing him face to face, touching him, conversing with him, and sleeping, sitting, and dining with him. And sometimes we have verses like this where there's a description of somebody, and then it'll say what to speak of this other situation. Like there's already so much love for Krishna here, what to speak of the love of the gopis of Vrindavan, right? So it's just a way of amplifying. How then? So even those who have only heard about Krishna once and have understood about him in the association of pure devotees are so attracted to him, they can never stop hearing about him. They have to keep hearing about him, right? It's like Prabhupada used that phrase, no stoppage, like more and more Krishna. What to speak of those who are living with him, living, breathing, eating, sleeping, dining, touching him, patting his shoulder. Like imagine how intense their love for Krishna must be. So that's that amplification. So the purport, the living being's constitutional position is one of serving a superior. He is obliged. So the first part of this is the problem. So it'll describe the problem, and then we'll hear the solution. So the problem, the living being's constitutional position is one of serving a superior. He is obliged to serve by force the dictates of illusory material energy in different phases of sense gratification. And in serving the senses, he is never tired. Even though he may be tired, the illusory energy perpetually forces him to do so without being satisfied. There's no end to such sense gratificatory business, and the conditioned soul becomes entangled in such servitude without hope of release. Sounds exhausting, doesn't it? What is it? It makes me think of, actually, I was talking to a friend about this verse, and she was sharing that she was thinking about like a rat in a labyrinth. Sometimes these people will create experiments with rats that are not very kind, but there have been studies where they try to see what, they'll stimulate a certain part of the brain of the rat that gives pleasure, if you can, like with electrode or whatever, something. and then, or if they press a button, or if they do something, right, then they feel that some happiness or joy in their brain. So they'll keep pressing it over and over and over and over, even though their body's getting tired, even though they're like, hungry and so on. So, so that's kind of a tragic example, but it's sort of our situation in this world as souls. We're pressing the button over and over, more. And so Prabhupada's saying, even though we might be tired, we never get a break. The illusory energy perpetually forces us to never feel satisfied. So we got to look for more. So it's quite exhausting. So now the solution. The release is only affected by association with pure devotees. By such association, one is gradually promoted to his transcendental consciousness. Thus, he can know that his eternal position is to render service unto the Lord and not to the perverted senses in the capacity of lust, anger, desire to lord it over, etc. Material society, just keep in mind the word materials here, material society, friendship, and love are all different phases of lust. And I just emphasize material because friendship and love and society with a spiritual purpose can actually be the source of helping us get out of this world. But when it's materially motivated, materially focused, then they're all phases of lust. Home, country, family, society, wealth, and all sorts of corollaries are all causes of bondage in the material world, where the threefold miseries of life are I just looked up concomitant. I used to always say it wrong, concomitant or something. Concomitant factors. By associating with pure devotees and by hearing them submissively, attachment for material enjoyment becomes slackened, and attraction for hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord becomes prominent. So that's what happens when we're with devotees, right? So by hearing with them, attachment for material enjoyment slackens, and attraction for hearing about Krishna grows. Once they are, they will go on progressively without stoppage. That's where I heard it recently, yeah. Without stoppage, like fire in gunpowder. So attachment for material enjoyment becomes slackened, and attraction for hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord becomes prominent. Once both of those things are, right, they will go on progressively without stoppage, like fire in gunpowder. It is said that Hari, the personality of Godhead, is so transcendently attractive that even those who are self-satisfied by self-realization and are factually liberated from all material bondage also become devotees of the Lord. Under the circumstances, it's easily understood what must have been the position of the Pandavas, who were constant companions of the Lord. They could not even think of separation from Sri Krishna, since the attraction was more intense for them because of continuous personal contact. His remembrance by his form, quality, name, fame, pastimes, etc. is also attractive for the pure devotee, so much so that he forgets all forms, quality, name, fame, and activities of the mundane world. And due to his mature association with pure devotees, he is not out of contact with the Lord for a moment. So a beautiful purport by Prabhupada where he's giving us hope that he's actually saying, even in the Pandavas are about to experience the separation from Krishna. Even then, by remembrance of Krishna, all of these, the attraction for Krishna grows, and due to his association with other devotees, he's never actually lost from Krishna. He's never out of contact from Krishna, always together with Krishna. So I want to focus on that for this take-home message for us, is that this last phrase particularly. Due to our mature association with pure devotees, we are not out of contact with the Lord for a moment. So let's look at that phrase for a minute. So the first word that strikes me is mature. What do you think that means? Mature association with pure devotees. You can.
The first thing that came to mind when I thought mature association is like knowing how to take proper advantage of that association, not like, yeah, like asking intelligent and well thought out questions that are relevant to, you know, your own situation, so that not just like talking about whatever. And when you're associating with devotees, you don't want to like talk about just mundane things. You want to use that time to really focus on Krishna.
Yeah. It has like a soberness to it, right? Like, I'm going to take advantage of this time. So I'm going to ask relevant questions. And yeah, good point. Anything else come to mind for mature association? Yeah.
Can be seen as like understanding what's valuable at that from that particular circumstance. Like if from devotee association we could get like something so much more valuable, and instead of getting that, we like just like don't take it seriously. That's not mature. So maturity would be knowing that this is what it can give me. It can give me Krishna's remembrance, his love.
Yeah.
So actually like associating with that purpose would be mature association.
Really good point. Yes. Thanks. And then, yeah, come on.
I was just thinking of the 6 loving exchanges that are talked about in the Nectar of Instruction, and how devotee association isn't just that we're with devotees, but that we're actually participating in the loving exchanges.
Yeah, that's a nice framework to work from. What would be the opposite if we're thinking about, okay, this is not a mature, like I'm associating with some devotees in an immature way, what would that look like? Yeah, microphone.
Prajalpa, gossiping,
Yeah,
any other sort of activity that takes your mind away from devotional service.
yes. So gossiping is a huge one, prajalpa. Yeah, there was that, what's the other Sanskrit word, village talk, gramyakata, like village talk. Did you hear, right? Did you hear the latest? Yes.
So I'm thinking of Bhishma Dev's conversation with Maharaj Yudhishthira. Bhishma Dev, Mahajan, Maharaj Yudhishthira we're hearing about, because that's something I've been studying. They don't talk about devotional service. So you have Maharaj Yudhishthira, Dharmaraj, and Bhishma Dev, Mahajan, but they also talk other things. So I'm wondering, I'm posing that as a question.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So anything that we're, like whenever we're trying to live lives of devotion, we also have to know how to function in the world. And we have, like you were mentioning, having specific questions for our situation that are relevant for us and presenting those, right? So that's going to include my situation in this particular body and mind right now today. How can I best serve? Or if we're talking in a bigger context, how can the Krishna house as a community best serve? Or in a bigger context, how can this kingdom best serve, right? Like, and so in order to fully utilize our lives to the best of our ability in devotion, we have to know the answers to questions about how to run things, especially the managers, right? We had to know how to work with people and how to understand their natures and which group it does this best and which group does that best and so on. So yeah, so it can all be connected to Krishna. It's an important point because sometimes we can get fanatical or we might be talking to somebody, but we think, oh, it has to just be literally a Sanskrit verse that we have to be speaking in, like the verses, like, hey, my turn to talk, hey, now this verse from Bhagavatam, your turn to talk. You know, it can get a little artificial almost, like disconnected at times, like if we're not doing it in a mature way, right? So if we're doing that, sometimes we do that, we just read with other friends and we just purely get into a conversation about Krishna, and those can be really sweet conversations, really special. But very often, because we're in these bodies and minds and our current life, we have to talk about what's happening in our life and how to integrate Krishna into that. And that's actual real maturity. How do I apply Krishna to my life right now? As a student, as someone who's working, as whatever my dharma inclinations are in this body and mind. So yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Yes, Govinda? Microphone.
The first word that came to my mind when you asked what is mature, I was thinking steady, being steady and taking the association, and immature, unsteady.
Yes.
I wonder if you can comment.
Yeah, so, that's a really good point. Yeah. When I think about someone being mature, they're dependable and they're steady, right? A mature person, they're reliable because they show up. They're immature people, or we often think of children, right? They're more erratic, in, out, hot, cold, happy, like a lot of fluctuating. Or even immature adults can be that way, right? Kind of just, so mature. So you were saying that a steadiness with showing up for association, right? Like in that context? Showing up, so being, so not losing, so I guess one way to say it would be if I'm mature in that way, I'm never gonna forget the value of the devotees around me. I'm not gonna like suddenly take them for granted and mistreat them or just be, just forget like, oh, they just treat them like ordinary people. I'm gonna be constant in my appreciation of those great souls who have taken Krishna consciousness. And that includes all the people we're living with. It's a hard task, especially when we're living day in and day out with people. We start to see their little, what do you call those, habits, right, that get on our nerves? What? Idiosyncrasies, right? Like someone chews with their mouth open or whatever, right? Different things. So that's what maturity is to look beyond the externals. And that actually ties into the next point I wanted to make. So we have this phrase, pure devotees, right? Pure devotees. So in the Nectar of Instruction, which you had mentioned earlier, there's a beautiful verse where it's described that those who are situated in their original Krishna conscious position, who have this awareness of Krishna consciousness, they don't identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. Like we shouldn't get distracted and think, oh, they're from this kind of family, that their body is such and such. It says here, a body with a bad complexion, maybe some scarring or whatever it can be, right? A deformed body, a diseased body, infirm body. So one should not overlook a devotee for those reasons. According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee, but despite of such seeming defects, the body of a pure devotee can't be polluted. It's exactly like the waters of the Ganges. Who here has seen the Ganges water? Ganges River? Have you seen it when it's foamy? It's like during the rainy season, sometimes full of bubbles, foam, and mud, right? Because there's a lot of rain and water. The Ganges waters do not become polluted by those foamy, frothy things on top. Those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water. So similarly, those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will associate with the pure devotees regardless of those seemingly imperfect things like material imperfections, right? Like we are hearing here. So I want to ask you, what is a pure devotee? Who is a pure devotee? Yes.
A pure devotee, Prabhupada often uses the phrase unalloyed, meaning that it's not necessarily the perfection of devotion, but it's when one is ceaselessly engaged and without material motive.
Yes. Yeah. So that's also in the Nectar of Instruction, right? That ceaselessly engaged, unmotivated, uninterrupted, yeah. Yes.
Today, actually read it this morning, and he has a little different definition, but can I just read it?
Sure, yeah.
Again, because it's nice. A pure devotee is he who loves Krishna without any material desire. Such pure devotees are very rare, but by the grace of Krishna, practically all the devotees and disciples who kindly join me, their symptoms are pure devotees. Even if they've got some ulterior desire, that will be removed very soon because they have taken to the pure process of Krishna consciousness.
Nice. Yeah. Prabhupada would give the analogy of mangoes, right? He would say, like, they're all of my disciples are pure devotees. They just haven't, like that, exactly like that. They just haven't fully ripened yet. They might be like the green mangoes on the tree and it's ripening from the sun and the tree's power of, and it's the mangoes are ripening on the tree. They might not be fully ripe yet, but they are, Prabhupada was seeing the end result. They are pure devotees because at the end of the day, they will be ripe mangoes. So Prabhupada would very often talk about the actual eternal nature of the souls. Yes, you're all pure devotees. You just haven't realized it yet, right? So, of course, we have to make some discrimination when we go and confide our hearts to somebody that we want wisdom, guidance and wisdom from. We have to look for qualities like, are they in the Nectar of Instruction, it says, those who have undergone spiritual initiation, they're engaged in worshiping the deities, and pure devotees are those whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. That's a big one. So you can see, okay, are they, and they're undeviated, and they're in their devotion. So they might not be 100% there, but we know, like, this is the criteria of a pure devotee, and that person is really well along the way, right? They're like they're getting ripe. We can see that because we know from all the scriptures what the definition of a pure devotee is. And the qualities in Bhagavad Gita, there's that long list: humility, tolerance, right? All these things. So we might look around, we might think, well, I don't see anybody who's 100% perfect or something. But that doesn't disqualify them, because as long as we're in the shower of Krishna consciousness, we're becoming purified, then we can help each other, remember Krishna. So we can go to those devotees who are devoid of the propensity to criticize others. That's a good way to check out, like, who do we want to hang out with? Do we want to hang out with those who are chit-chatting, Gramya Katha, talking about prajalpa, right, which often leads to criticism? Or do we want to spend time with those who they're above that? They don't criticize people behind their back. They're very magnanimous in nature. They want to encourage everyone, right? So let's go and seek out in a mature way the association of devotees like that. One other point is that by looking at others around us as their potential, like seeing everyone around us, every one of you are pure devotees, just not fully manifested yet, but on the way, very close, right? We look at each other in that way. Wow, you're all very dear to Krishna. You're all special souls. We actually amplify by seeing others with that vision. They become that too. We become that. We help each other become our best by seeing each other as our best. And yeah, so just that idea that even just one point here is that in modern, they've done research on this just in a modern material context, what to speak of spiritual, but they'll sometimes with teachers, right? So if a teacher, they've done some studies, and I don't know how ethical, probably these are older, but they would tell some teachers like such and such about different students, like, oh, they're really good at this, and if the teacher went in thinking something, had this image of the student being a really good, wonderful person or something, that relationship and that student would achieve so much more just by what the teacher expected of that student, right? So similarly, if we're all expecting each other to be devoid of the propensity to criticize others, we're just like, yeah, you're all, and kind of looking at each other for our best, then it encourages us, even without knowing it, we'll want to be our best because others are seeing us that way. So we'll all keep growing together. Yes, Prabhu.
I think of how Prabhupada would often say that one of the most important things in this evaluation is a person's determination and desire. So I would think that he, like Bhagavad Gita 9:30 and 31, even if someone still has these imperfections that tend to draw on them, they still are determined in their situated in determination. So they really want to be perfected. And that can be seen as actually devotion.
Yes.
There's still imperfections, things clinging on to that person. They're not perfectly situated in prema yet, and yet they're determined to have it.
Yeah.
Devotees will say, well, I'm in Maya, right? What does that really mean? Is it possible for someone who says they're in Maya to be in Maya? They're making an evaluation based upon their desire to be rightly situated. So that's, in a sense, that's a Krishna conscious evaluation. They're evaluating themselves in terms of what they perceive as the perfection of life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And just to wrap it up, going back to that first, remember that first line of the verse, Sat, we heard about Sat, and then Dusanga, right? Dusanga. So there's, or Sat and Asat, right? So I just want to comment one more time on that. So when we're thinking about association, Sat means real, eternal, truth, purity, right? So we want to create that. And the best way to do that is to really see each other as spirit souls. That becomes Sat, real, right? Real. Because the souls are the only thing that are real. Everything else is transitory and considered, in some ways, described as illusion because of how fleeting it is. It's often described as illusion, the body, the mind, all these things that we think are us. But when the souls are interacting, like trying to help each other come closer to Krishna, that's a Sat association. So as we go about our day, like today, we can think about, okay, let's try to have some Sat moments with other people, right? Some real moments, like really talking to them as a sincere soul and find out how to connect on that level and be our best so that they want to be their best and they, like that, and just kind of amplify and grow together. So it's actually very easy when we're surrounded by devotees who want to do that. So thank you so much. We'll end here because it's after. And Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.